Welcome to the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series. Tonight's talk, 4,000 Years of Women in Science by Sethanne Howard of the Washington Academy of Sciences. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Summers of the Space Telescope Science Institute, and I will remind you, as I've done every month during the pandemic, that the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series will be online only until further notice. I also have to thank the amazing tech team, Thomas Marufu and Grant Justice, who allow us to do this elaborate production from the comfort of my basement. Our upcoming talks on December 7th, we will have the James Webb Space Telescope Countdown to Launch by Dr. J.W. Know-It-All. Okay, so that's not really his name, but I was promised I would have a speaker's name by the end of this week. So there will be somebody from the Webb mission telling you about this amazing mission that will launch on December 18th. In January, the topic will be galaxy clusters, and the speaker will be Maria Montesquiles here of the Space Telescope Science Institute. And in February, we have a lecture on From the Front Lines of the Exoplanet Revolution by Arpita Roy, also of STSCI. So if you want to find out about those upcoming talks and find out who Dr. J.W. Know-It-All turns out to be, you can go to our website, www.stsci.edu/public-lectures. There you'll find on the left-hand side the link to our webcasts, both on our Space Telescope webcasting site and the playlist on YouTube. And on the right, we'll have the easy way to subscribe to our email. Just enter your email address and hit the subscribe button. Also, we have the links to all of our upcoming lectures. And if you click on one of those lectures, you get all the details about it, including the descriptions, and after it's been recorded, the link to the STSCI webcast, as well as the link to it on YouTube. If you want to keep up with things, well, just sign up for our email announcements. The easiest way is, of course, to sign up at the website. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Hubble Space Telescope, all one word, Hubble Space Telescope. And if you subscribe, you'll get the new video notices and you'll get reminders of these live events. Finally, if you have comments or questions, you can send them to the email address publiclecture@stsci.edu. For those of you who would like to follow us on social media, for the Hubble Space Telescope, for the James Webb Space Telescope, and for our institute, the Space Telescope Science Institute, we're on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. I myself do a tiny bit of social media on Facebook and Twitter if you want to know what I'm thinking these days. And now our news from the universe for November 2021. The first story tonight, a mirrored galaxy. Now, this comes to us from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, in particular, a galaxy cluster with the totally unmemorable name J22301.47-081017.8. That's the designation for this galaxy cluster, okay? Yeah, not all things in the night sky have pretty names. But the interesting object in this galaxy cluster does have a moniker. It's actually called Hamilton's object. And so this is an image of this galaxy. And we're calling this the single image because this cluster is so massive that it actually warps space. Now, via general relativity, the presence of mass warps the space around it. And in this galaxy cluster, there's so much mass that it warps the space enough to divert the path of light. We call this gravitational lensing. And this galaxy, seen in this single image, actually passes multiple ways through this galaxy cluster and shows up here in a mirrored image. Now, we call this a mirrored image because it's got a really special property because it mirrors across a line of reflection. That line of reflection is what we call in gravitational lensing things a caustic line. It's a line of sort of infinite magnification. And that galaxy lies close enough, or its light passes close enough to that line of infinite magnification, the caustic, that it actually is reflected across it. And this is a really cool event. You don't see this very often, okay, to get to see it. So we have both the single image of Hamilton's object, plus we have this double mirrored image of it. So that means there are three images of this, for example, white dot here. And there are also three images of this white blob here, sort of at the core of the galaxy. And then there are three images of this blue little piece on the side of the galaxy. So gravitational lensing allows us to see multiple views of the same object, and it gives us this sort of determination of where the mass is in this galaxy cluster. Because what's really important for this when you're doing the gravitational lensing of this is that most of the mass of the cluster is in dark matter. And by doing this gravitational lensing, studying this gravitational lensing, we can actually map the distribution of dark matter in these galaxies clusters. And in this case, we come up with a really cool object with three images, a single one and a mirrored one of Hamilton's object. Our second story tonight is a pumpkin star. Now, we here at Hubble, we have no shame, okay? We are very happy to make a press release related to a holiday. And 2 days ago, it was Halloween. So for a Halloween release, we released this image. It's of the star CW Leonis. And what you're supposed to see in this is, what I see in this is, hey, doesn't it look kind of like a pumpkin viewed top down? You got the orange circle in here, and then you got the little green of the stem sticking out there. Except that the view here is mostly in infrared light. So the orange here is actually near 814 nanometers, which is beyond the red end of the spectrum. And the green is out even further out into the infrared. So what color are they really? If it's infrared, they sort of just translate it there. So sort of get this pumpkin, you can say it's kind of a cheat, but it's a cool image. And it looks like it kind of looks like a pumpkin. But what's really cool about this image is what's actually going on here. So CW Leonis is a red giant star. This is a star at the end of its life, and its nuclear fusion in the core is going a little unstable. And it actually is blowing out its outer layers. And this is called a carbon star because these rings that you see in this image are layers of mostly carbon that has been blown out from the star. As it goes unstable at the end of its life, it blows out this extra stuff. The other cool thing is if you look deep in the center, you can sort of see look like diffraction spikes. And I sort of drew a pattern here to say, now this is what, when you first look at it, it looks like diffraction spikes from the star. But Hubble's diffraction spikes are a nice cross of 4 spikes. So these can't be diffraction spikes. And what they are light beams spewing out from the star. Okay, there is obviously material around it, and that there are these preferred paths where the light gets out and creates these really strong beams. And this is really weird because I haven't personally seen this myself. I'm not a stellar expert, but in terms of a red giant star going through its final days, I've not seen beams of light like this. So CW Leonis, beyond being this pretty pumpkin star, is also a very interesting star in its own right, and showing you the way that stars, have these unstable episodes as they're passing through the end of their life. Okay, so our speaker tonight is Sethanne Howard, and usually I give you an interesting tidbit just before I introduce her. Well, let me just start with that interesting tidbit because in the 1970s, Sethanne took one of the images of Halley's Comet from 1910 and digitized it and colorized it. And it is that image that is on this stamp from India. that is worth 1 rupee. And so she likes to tell her students that her work is worth at least 1 rupee. Well, actually, Sethanne stuff is worth an awful lot more than that, because she has done an amazing number of things in her life, starting with getting her bachelor's degree from UC Davis, where she was the first woman to get a bachelor's degree in physics from UC Davis. She went on to get her master's in nuclear physics from Rensselaer, and she got her PhD in astrophysics from Georgia State. And then she's had quite the illustrious career. She's been in many, many different places: Emory University, Los Alamos, NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, NASA HQ, and she ended up at the United States Naval Observatory. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sethanne Howard.
Thank you, Frank, a lot. That's very nice. Should I share my screen?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
And remember to include the audio.
And I did. Oh, good. I got to find what I'm going to share. There. Okay, and we're going to make it full screen. We went ahead one. There we go.
All right, that looks great.
Okay. We'll do it again. And we want to make a pointer, laser pointer, because that'll keep it from advancing. Women hold up half the sky is a saying native to many cultures: Indians from India, Africans, even the Europeans. Women hold up half the sky. Therefore, I issue a challenge. If women hold up half the sky, where are they in science? Why aren't they listed? So I ask you to name one just to yourself before the 20th century. And I do before the 20th century because after 1910, we get too many women and they swamp the wonderful women of the past. So I don't want to swamp the women of the past. I'm going to tell you about them and assume that the 20th century we just take off. So when you name one, it cannot be Marie Curie, and this is a space telescope, so we're not going to name any astronomers either. And that's your challenge. See if you can come up with one before the 20th century. And put it in the chat or whatever. If you've got a good one, put it in the chat or ask a question later. So what I want to do is set the history stage and education stage to tell you what was going on 4,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Writing began around 3,500 and after that in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And it went to cuneiform, and I'm going to show you some of that. Egypt came in about the same time with hieroglyphs. Elam is Proto-Persian. India was a little bit later, and much later in minus 1200, China came in. This is an oracle bone from China. Is their first example of writing. So you need writing to have history. Now, hieroglyphs, everybody's seen a hieroglyph, and we don't do anything like that today. Today, we went down this path and we got an alphabet. So we don't do that at all, right? That's just a joke. Okay, setting the early history stage. Everything in the blue box is going to be possible, maybe legendary, maybe not. First of all, you get writing. You need writing to have history. And in 20 minus 2700 was Merit Ptah. She may be legendary, maybe not. She was her image is found near Saqqara, a step pyramid. And that's her image. And she was called by her son, the chief physician. She may be legendary. I don't know. There's not a lot of information about her other than the fact that her image exists on the tomb where her patient died. Then there's Kudabao. Kudabao was king of Kish. She was the only woman in the Sumerian king list who was a king, not a queen. They liked her so much, they thought so highly of her that they said, you can be called king. And I think they liked her so much because she owned and distributed and made the beer. And you got beer and ale drinks from her. And that was why she was so popular. And apparently in legend says she ruled for 100 years. Now, where is Kish, you might ask? And I want to do a little bit of geography here. Here's the Tigris coming down into the Persian Gulf, and here's the Euphrates coming down into the Persian Gulf. Kish is there. We're going to talk about Ur, and it's there. At this time, 4,000 years ago, it was a port city. It was on the Persian Gulf. Today, all this is filled in, and here is where the Persian Gulf begins in the 21st century, down here where the blue line is. But at the time we were going to work, Ur was a port city, and it was a major port city. It brought in stuff from all over the Middle East. And just for curiosity's sake, there's Babylon, in case you're curious. Sumer is the name of the people, the black-headed people, who lived in southern Mesopotamia. And Akkadian is the name of the people who were Semitic, not the black-headed people, but Semitic people who lived in northern Mesopotamia. So that just sets the geography. Now, jumping over to China, we have the first, apparently, maybe legend says, was the first queen consort of China, and sitting in her garden, she finally figured out how silkworms made silk. And she developed and she created and developed the silk industry in China. It sounds like legendary to me, but I believe it could be. Somebody had to do it. Semiramis. Semiramis was queen of Babylon. Now, they think she built tunnels under the Euphrates so that you could go from one side of the Euphrates in Babylon to the other side of the Euphrates in Babylon. And they think her legend is based on this lady here, Shamuramet, who lived in 824, minus 824. But she's probably legendary, the minus 2500 one. So those are all legendary. Now we come to Hatshepsut, who's real, that she was a real pharaoh of Egypt. And just for curiosity's sake, what else was going on? Moses was around. The Trojan War happened. My particular favorite was chocolate entered the world in minus 1100 in the southern hemisphere. And that's when we got chocolate, which I think is important. The first Olympics were held a little bit later. The year of the founding of the city of Rome was minus 648. And then you have the Dark Ages, what people call the Dark Ages, going up to 1000 CE. That's a misnomer. They were not really dark at all, and that's unfortunate. I'm going to come in with my first scientist right about there, right after legend quits and reality takes over. So that's where I'm going to come in with my first scientist. Long before chocolate. So how did they educate? We do know a little bit about that. We know that if you were literate, you were numerate. In other words, if you could read, you could write and cipher. They came together. They weren't separated. But more importantly, you are a member of the upper classes. This was done only for the well-to-do, not for the common people of the village or city. So only the upper classes could read and write and cipher. To learn those things, they were called philosophers. They were not called scientists. They were called philosophers. They're generalists. Sumer did it with schools teaching cuneiform. They had actual schools. Egypt did it with actual schools where they did it in hieroglyphs. India did it with schools a little bit later where they did it in Sanskrit. And China taught the 6 arts of Confucius a little bit later yet. And the Western world, we did the 7 liberal arts. So what does that mean? Well, in Sumeria, the Eduba is the name of a school of learning, a formal school of learning. They were formal. Students signed up and went through learning with it from a teacher. They taught reading and math and astronomy. Now, in this era was the beginning of modern science. Modern science and modern history began in Sumer. Not later, but this is where it began, when you had reading and writing and ciphering available to the upper classes. So India taught 6 different things: phonetics, meter, grammar, entomology, astronomy, and ritual practices. The 6 arts of Confucius: rites, music, archery, chivalry, calligraphy, and math and astronomy. The 7 liberal arts, if you're curious what they are, the 3 are grammar, rhetoric, and logic. The 4 are arithmetic, geometry, music, and guess what? Astronomy. So astronomy showed up everywhere. And the word scientist representing these people was not used until the 1850s. So they were all called natural philosophers, generalists. Here is my first lady, 4,400 years ago. Her name is, in Sumerian, which I obviously speak fluently, Enheduanna, meaning N is the name for chief, lady, lord, queen, boss, head, king. N is the title, and Enheduanna means ornament of heaven. So she was the first astronomer priestess in the city of Ur. And she actually wrote that something has been created that no one has created before. And she was the daughter of Sargon of Akkadian. And he was a warlord who captured Sumeria and installed his daughter as the first astronomer priestess in Ur. She was the first. So that could be what she means here by something has been created. She was the first one to become an astronomer priestess in Ur. We have her picture. This is from the University of Pennsylvania Museum. It's a photo I took illegally while the guard was out of the room, but I was with the curator of the tablets, the chief curator of the tablets of the museum, who said, go ahead and take the picture. So it's legal. And there she is in procession. We think the procession to establish her as the end priestess. And the side of the disc describes all this. It's written on the side of the alabaster disc. It's no longer on display. It was on display when I was there, but now it's put away. We know where she lived. This is the aerial view of the archaeological dig at Ur. And she lived in quarters called the Gipar, which was the sacred place where the astronomer priestesses lived. And Ur is famous for its ziggurat. Now, the ziggurat was built after her time, so it wasn't there when she was there. But I put it here because it's what Ur is most famous for. And to give you a picture of the scale, there is the partial reconstruction of the ziggurat with an army plane going over it. And Iraq and the US military were restoring the ziggurat. She created observatories across Sumer with which to view the stars, planets, and moons, and more importantly, record their motions. They wrote this stuff down. She was one of the primary advocates of astronomy and mathematics in base 60 math. Sumer used base 60, which is why we have 60 minutes to the hour and 60 seconds to the minute and 360 degrees in a circle. That comes from Sumeria. About her time. She helped maintain one of the first calendars, which was a lunar calendar, and that calendar is still used today to date Easter, Passover, Ramadan, and other religious events. It's a mess to calculate Easter according to the rules, using a lunar calendar, using tables, using the golden number, using a whole bunch of oddball things. It isn't as simple as the first full moon after first whatever we use. It isn't that simple. Passover is just as complicated. Ramadan is easier to predict. It's just somebody seeing the first of the new moon. We have her writing. She wrote things down on tablets, and we have her writing. This is her name in cuneiform and Hedwana. Now, if you're my generation and you think of writing tablets, what do you think of as a tablet? If you're my generation, you think of this. Huge things that are going to get thrown down and broken. That's not what they were. Unfortunately, Cecil B. DeMille got it wrong. This is what a tablet looks like. And after the lecture is over, I will show you a tablet. The museum wouldn't give me her tablet. I was very crushed, but they wouldn't give me her tablet. So I have another one to show you. And in translation, you can find on the web 2 of her long poems and 42 of her short poems. And they wrote in poems, couplets. Everybody did. If you wrote literature, you did it in poetry. The Bible was done that way. And this particular tablet is her hymn to Inanna tablet, the moon goddess. And she talks about how the Inanna filled the land with venom and like thunder when you roar over the earth. So she was writing about her religion. And to give you a sample, this is a tablet compared to a cell phone. So they really are small. They're not very big. They can fit in a pocket. So I put this up just to give you a sense of the scale. They're not huge things. And they're written, if you see the line coming down the middle, they're written in 2 sections, and they're written on both sides, front and back. This is a sample of her writing. The true woman who possesses exceeding wisdom, she's discussing herself. She consults a tablet of lapis lazuli, which was very rare. It came from Afghanistan and Turkestan and was imported in through the port city of Ur. She gives advice to all lands. That's a leader. She measures off the heavens. That's an astronomer. She places the measuring cords on the earth. That's mathematics, surveying. That's why I think it's fair to call her an astronomer priestess. In the Gipar, which is where they lived, the priests' rooms, that princely shrine of cosmic order, they tracked the passage of the moon. Now we know that's how they did it. They built these observatories across Sumer to track the passage of the moon, to build the lunar calendar. The British historian wrote that her compositions remained models of petitionary prayer, and you can find samples of them through the Babylonians, the Hebrew Bible, and Homer, and all the way into the early Christian church. Her work was studied for over 500, 600 years after her death. And as it said before, she was called the Shakespeare of the ancient world and the world's first poet. Those are good things. So she could read and write, we know that. She standardized the political structure of the Sumerian cities, which were all scattered, doing things different ways. And we know that the first code of laws came from Sumer, not from her, but from Sumer about the same time, long before Hammurabi came up with the code of laws. She codified the religious structure and brought the whole Sumer into a common sense of how you treated the gods and goddesses in your religion. She controlled the flow of food and supplies from the city temple to the populace. That takes math. She maintained the calendar as head of the synod. A group of people who look for the new moon is called a synod. Hence the synodic month in astronomy. So she was head of the synod in Ur, and she would be looking for the new moon to define the beginning of the month. She managed the distribution of land around the temple. So she did. My question to you is, was she a philosopher or early scientist? And I think she was. I think the answer is yes. But I pose this because I posted her story on the AAAS website, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I got blowback from philosophers who said science did not start until the ancient Greeks. Some said science didn't start until Galileo. And I think they're wrong. I think we have an example of one right here. So you can make up your own mind as to whether you think she was an early scientist or not, based on what I've told you. Now, the earliest we've gone through on the top, Agonice, underneath Enheduanna, was the wife of Sesostris, a pharaoh of Egypt, and she used hieroglyphs to write down the planetary motions, which is a neat trick in hieroglyphs. I couldn't do it, but she was one who could track the planets. Taputi is known as the world's first chemist. She was head of the palace place that made the perfume, which was not just to smell good, but it was used in religious events. It was used in political events. It was used in all kinds of events, as well as just to smell good. So she is known as the world's first chemist. Penthesilea was the queen of the Amazons. And I've got her in here because she was killed in the Trojan War by Achilles, but she is known for an invention. And the invention was the battle axe. Excuse me while a cat enters the picture and leaves us. Sorry about that. But she's eager to find out what's going on. There are 3 women mentioned in the ancient Indian Vedas as natural philosophers. So they also had women as natural philosophers. Their names are there. I can't really pronounce them, but those are the names from India. So we had a series of women all the way along the years, and one man, Imhotep, the man in blue. He was the one who was the architect of the pyramids. And he may be legendary because he turned out they made him into a god because he designed the pyramids. And he lived in the time when it could have been legendary. So we don't really know. Now I could show you a list. Forget the list. We're not going to do lists. Just know that if I mention a woman, there are 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 lined up behind her that we could mention. So if I mention Theano, know that there are 30 others lined up around her. She was the wife of Pythagoras and is the one who developed the golden ratio, which says A plus B is to A as A is to B. And the golden ratio is an infinite number, but it's starts off 1.618. And it's supposedly the most pleasing of how things should look if you use the golden ratio. So here's the golden mean spiral. And it's based on identical golden rectangles, each one with a golden ratio of 1.618 of the long side to the short side. So that's the golden mean spiral. And we find it in reality in things from the sea, shells, a staircase I wouldn't go up, hurricanes, and galaxies. That's M51. And if you can see the faint, they have it here. There's the spiral. And moving ahead, Cleopatra is not somebody you would think of as a scientist, but this lady spoke 8 languages. She studied geography, history, astronomy, international diplomacy, mathematics, alchemy, medicine, zoology, economics, and more. And that makes her a natural philosopher. And so she was able to do what anybody else would do who's a natural philosopher, and who also spoke 8 languages. She was the first of the Greek pharaohs who actually learned Egyptian, ancient Egyptian. That we don't think of Cleopatra as a scientist, but she's the one who gave Julius Caesar, an astronomer, to reconstruct the Roman calendar and fix it. Mary Hebrea was an alchemist of the 1st century. She invented the hydrochloric acid. She's the one who came up with hydrochloric acid, and she invented tools to do her alchemy. And one of them was a water bath. That's a double boiler. In France, it's called the bain-marie. They named it after her. In Germany, it's called Marienbad. They named it after her. It still is today. So she invented ways to handle hydrochloric acid, which was, I suppose, very tricky. And very talented lady in Alexandria. She lived in Alexandria, Egypt in the 1st century. Hypatia is one you probably have heard of, and it's pronounced Hypatia because she was Greek. The Americans mispronounce it, but it's properly pronounced Hypatia. People say she invented an astrolabe. I don't think she invented an astrolabe. I think she built her own, but she didn't invent the concept. But she did invent the concept of measuring the specific gravity of water. And we know this because of letters her students wrote to her. She was called the philosopher at the Great Library in Alexandria, and letters addressed to the philosopher were delivered to her. She was a teacher, an inventor, a writer, a mathematician, and I recommend to you a DVD that is a film of her life, a short film of her life called Agora. and it is which is Greek for marketplace. And it's a wonderful film that tries to show a balanced view of what life was like in Alexandria during her time and how she played into the society. She was a pagan. There were Christians, there were Jews, and there were the Romans and the pagans. She was a pagan. Now, she was known for, she wrote several books. Unfortunately, when the library was finally destroyed, we lost all her books. We only know she wrote them from letters her students had written her. So she did write commentary on lots of stuff and wrote the text, the astronomical canon, but we don't know what it means because we don't have it. Fables should be taught as fables, myths as myths, and miracles as poetic fancies. To teach superstitions as truth is a most terrible thing. The child mind accepts and believes them, and only through great pain and perhaps tragedy can he be in after years relieved of them. In fact, men will fight for a superstition quite as quickly as for a living truth, often more so, since a superstition is so intangible that you cannot get at it to refute it. But truth is a point of view, and so is changeable. That's a quote from Hypatia, an interesting quote. I think it lasts through the centuries. She was known for speaking her mind. And if you remember one thing from the talk, remember this: reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. That's a wonderful quote from her. Now, she was in her chariot riding through Alexandria, and the Bishop Cyril of Alexandria hated her because she was a pagan, he was a Christian, and he incited a gang of Christian monks, and they pulled her from her chariot and peeled her to death with oyster shells. And that was the method of her death. And she therefore sacrificed for her science. Something we wouldn't know about today, would we? Well, Dr. Jinwa Mahmoudi was an Iranian meteorologist, a woman who dared to be a scientist and was executed for this by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on December 27, 1981. That was 1,500 years later. And of course, that we could say that's it too, but now we have Malala. Thank goodness she's still with us, Malala. In 2012 is when she was attacked for trying to read. So I like to dedicate these talks to Dr. Mahmoudi. Now let's do a brief update of where we are. We're moving into the Dark Ages, coming forward in time. The Dark Ages were a time where there were lots of schools. In India, there was a Buddhist monastery that taught a university. And then in Morocco, in 859, Fatima founded this university. I can't pronounce its name, but it was founded in 859 and it exists today. It calls itself the longest existing university in the world because it was built in 1859 and is still going strong today. Italy, the Salerno Medical School in 1875, and then convents and monasteries ran schools throughout Europe. If a woman wanted to learn anything, a high-ranking woman, she would go to a convent school where they would teach her the 7 liberal arts. In the early Middle Ages, the University of Bologna was founded in 1088 and the University of Paris in 1100. Now, they both are called universities, but they are very, very distinct from each other. One in Italy, one in France. The one in Italy was founded in 1088, and from that time to this, women have been welcomed at the doors of universities in Italy. University of Paris. The University of Paris was only the first ranking people in the priesthood were eligible to go to the University of Paris. And that's a big difference between the University of Bologna and the University of Paris. One was men only, one was men and women. Sondu was a queen of Korea. And in the 6th century, she liked astronomy and had built a temple of the sun and moon. And my cat just is going to try to destroy my internet here. Yes, sorry about that. And this is what remains of the temple of the sun and moon today. But she was the queen of Korea who liked astronomy. Hildegard is one of my favorites. She was an abbess, a Benedictine abbess in the 11th century in Bingen am Rhein in Germany, northern Germany. She was everything. She was a scholar, a leader, musician, writer, mystic, healer, artist. That's one of her illuminations on the left, and it's one of my favorites because it reminds me of falling stars. She wrote a book. She wrote several books. One of the books was on natural healing, and she is honored by many people as the founder of holistic medicine. And the book has a recipe for spice cookies because cinnamon was an important thing to calm your bitterness of heart and mind. And you can find this recipe on the web. It's called Hildegard's Cookies of Joy. So you don't need to copy it down. It's out there. Hildegard's Cookies of Joy. If I couldn't figure a way to get spice cookies through the internet to you, I'm very sorry, because I usually hand them out at these talks. But you can see they're made of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, and then the regular cookie concoction. And they're about this big around, small, and they taste delicious. So your mind will be joyous, your senses purified, and harmful humors will diminish. She wrote music. She wrote Gregorian chants, and this is a page of her music. And let me see if it will play a little bit. It won't play this way. I have to change it back to a pointer. There we go. There will not go on too long because it runs into copyright issues. But it is said that her music was so beautiful that people would faint upon hearing it. And 1,000 years after her time, in 2000, the National Cathedral did a whole day of her Gregorian chants. I have 8 CDs of her Gregorian chants. If you're interested in her music, make sure that the CD or DVD you buy is not one with orchestral accompaniment. Gregorian chants are meant to be a cappella, so don't get one with an orchestra, and they've done that. Some other people have put orchestral music to it, and that's not right. She painted. These are 3 of her illuminations, the stars on the right. The one in the middle is called the cosmic egg. And So she was very talented as an artist. Most of the nuns were. That's what one of the things they did was illume or paint prayer books and the Bible. Now, she wrote a book called The Physical World. And in that book, she said the stars gravitate around the sun just as the earth attracts the creatures which inhabit it. This is universal gravitation, long before Newton. And now she was wrong about gravitating about the sun, but that's okay because everybody thought the sun was the center of the universe in those days. But it was the fact that the earth's gravitation and the stars' gravitation was the same. And I think that's wonderful. Her analogies: stars are not immovable. They transverse the universe, just like blood moving through the body. That's good. But she wasn't perfect. I like to pretend she's perfect, but she wasn't. A precious gem will heal the body if taken to bed, and a diamond held in the mouth of a liar will cure any spiritual defects. I'd love to test this out. So if you send me your diamonds, I'll test it out for you. Then Herod of Landsberg, a little bit later, wrote what we consider to be the first encyclopedia called the Garden of Delights. And in it, let me turn back to the laser pointer. These are the 7 liberal arts around here. Each one is a lady representing a liberal, one of the 7. So she wrote one of the world's first encyclopedias on the 7 liberal arts. And she taught in her school, in her convent, the 7 liberal arts. This is a frontispiece to Euclid's Elements, and it shows a woman teaching the monks geometry. That was 1310. So women were still involved. I don't know her name, but she was somebody who taught geometry. Then moving ahead a little bit, I try to avoid sticking in a whole bunch of astronomers because I'm prejudiced for astronomy, and I didn't want to inundate you with astronomers. But Tycho Brahe was one of the last great pre-telescope observers. And people don't know that his sister is Sophia, helped him in his work. And she also did observations for him and with him. And she also was a physician and healed people who came to his observatory and were sick. She would heal them. So the Danish government has said, when Denmark remembers her Tycho, she should not forget the noble woman, his sister, who in spirit was more than blood. That shining star in the Danish sky is indeed a double star. Brahe was Danish. So she counts. So does this lady, Maria Marian. She drew pictures of insects and traveled the world. She went to South America to study insects there. She was from Germany. And she said that, note that nature shall always be wrestling, art and nature, until they eventually conquer one another, so that the victory is the same stroke and line. That which is conquered conquers at the same time. The United States issued 32-cent stamp in her honor with 2 of her drawings. And she was the first to show the complete life cycle of an insect. They didn't know that insects actually went through a life cycle to become what you see as the grown-up insect. If you find her drawings today, they're available, but they cost many thousands of dollars. Her drawings are so exquisitely beautiful. It seems to me debilitating for a Catholic not to know everything in this life of divine mysteries that can be learned through natural means. This was Sister de la Cruz in Mexico City. She was also a poet and is honored by Mexico by putting her image on the 1,000 peso bill. Science and knowledge will strengthen faith in God, not weaken it. And I think it's interesting that she finds no conflict between religion and science. And it would be good to carry that forward. There is no conflict. She had a great library in Mexico City. She had a telescope. She observed the stars. We know that much. And she had a lot of books. She was not popular with the bishop, but I can understand that. The bishop didn't like her doing all this stuff. The Taj Mahal is famous throughout the world, and the maternal aunt of the woman buried in the Taj Mahal, the maternal aunt, her name is Noor Mahal, and she actually invented attar of roses. She was an alchemist, a chemist, and she made perfume. And we still use attar of roses today in building perfume. I added in another astronomer, but not for the reason you think. She wrote in one of her books a hint that if the motion of Uranus isn't quite right, there could be another planet out there causing the problem. And it was a hint that there might be another planet. And it is because of the hint in her book that astronomers went out and found the planet Neptune. So she wrote several things that are, she translated Laplace into English. It's still used as a textbook. She wrote a paper on the magnetic properties of the violet rays of the solar spectrum. I'd love to see that paper. The Connection of the Physical Sciences is a textbook in which this quote appears about Uranus and the possibility of another planet, and Physical Geography, and Molecular and Microscopic Science. Now, I put her in here not because she did all these wonderful things, but because she was Scottish. And Scotland, in 2016, she competed against Maxwell and Telford, two other Scots, in a public competition run by the Royal Bank of Scotland to decide whose face should appear on the new 10-pound notes. And they did it on Facebook. And she actually won. She beat out Maxwell and Telford, and the 10-pound note has her picture on it. So I think that's wonderful. That's a country dedicating its money, pictures that they use to circulate to a scientist. Now, British patent number 401 was possibly one of the first patents granted to the colonies by England, and it was granted to Sir Thomas Masters for an invention by his wife, Sibylla. His wife did the work, and he got her name on the patent, but women couldn't get patents in their own name in England at that time. But he did get her name on the patent. It was a device to clean and cure Indian corn. They built the device, ran it, and made a lot of money, and he became mayor of Philadelphia. But it's the first patent issued to the colonies, was issued for an invention by a woman, Sibylla. Now, the Marquise de Châtelet was a woman of, I don't know what you'd call her. She lived a wild life. Her translation of Newton is still the only French translation. She's French. She translated it into French. She lived with Voltaire, and they formed a competition in science. They disagreed on the concept of what fire was, and they wrote essays and submitted them to the French Academy of Sciences. The essays did not win first prize, but they won honorable mention. So she is the first woman to be published in the French Academy of Sciences. But I have her here because of what she said. Judge me for my own merits or lack of them, but do not look upon me as a mere appendage to this great general or that great scholar. I am in my own right a whole person, responsible to myself alone for all that I am, all that I do, and all that I say. It may be that there are metaphysicians and philosophers whose learning is greater than mine, although I have not met them, yet they are but frail humans too, and have their faults. So when I add the sum total of my graces, I confess I am inferior to no one. I think that's another wonderful quote, and it's just as good today as it was then. Maria Agnese was Italian. She was called the Oracle of the Seven Tongues because by the time she was 7, she could read, write, and speak 7 languages. Those are the 7 languages around her. She was a mathematician, and she wrote a book in mathematics that was going to be used as a textbook. And in that textbook, she solved a curve. It's called the curve of the Witch of Agnese. And those of you who have taken algebra and geometry, calculus, you may have come across, I did in school. I came across the curve of the Witch of Agnese. Now, they did not think she was a witch. That wasn't the problem. The problem is that the curve, the word for curve in Middle Italian is aversiera, that which turns. The person who translated it into English made a typo. He misread that A apostrophe as belonging to the rest of the word and stuck an L in front of it. And that's witch, or cognate with adversary in English. So they think the curve is a witch, not Maria Agnese. And the curve is, this is the curve in red, just to show you the curve she solved. We can do that today with computers very simply, but she didn't have computers when she did it. The red shows the curve she solved as, and the solution is down at the bottom. Dr. Mary Walker, you may have heard of, was a surgeon in the Civil War. And she was honored by the government for her work as a surgeon by the Congressional Medal of Honor, the only one given to a woman. And that's fine. She accepted it. That was great. But afterwards, after the Civil War was over, she joined the group of women who wore bloomers. And bloomers were a bad thing. They were worn by women of low moral standards. And so the government said, we've given the Congressional Medal of Honor to a woman who has not high standards. They asked for the medal back. I think her family, by that time she had died, I think her family refused to give it back. But nonetheless, they retracted the Congressional Medal of Honor. And it wasn't until President Jimmy Carter that he restored the Medal of Honor to her family legally, so they can now display it. Florence Nightingale, for her contributions to Army statistics, she was a statistician, and she became the first woman to be elected a fellow of the Statistical Society. And it was her writings on massive hospital planning. In other words, how do you plan a hospital that's going to treat people coming in fast and dying and living and treatment, and that technique she set up established the techniques we use today in setting up hospitals, hospital planning. So she was quite an important scientist. Washing machines, I'm almost at the end. Washing machines. You must know that before washing machines, nobody washed clothes. It was too much work. You wore your clothes all season long, and because they got dirty and full of fleas and everything, you could get all kinds of flea-borne diseases. So people were constantly sick or sneezing or whatever. In 1691, the first patent for a washing machine was issued. And then in 1782, the hand operating rotating drum, and that's the picture, that looks very difficult to use. I wouldn't want to use it in 1782. So even then, it was too difficult to wash clothes on a routine basis. You do them very rarely. But in 1888 came the patent for the rotary press attachment. And the rotary press attachment is this. I've used a washing machine like that. And all of a sudden, it became feasible to wash clothes regularly. And all of a sudden, the disease rate dropped. Right around the turn of the 1900s, people weren't as sick. They were wearing clean clothes, and that made a huge difference in their health. The patent for that rotary press attachment was sold for $18. And you know that I am Black, and if it was known that a Negro woman patented the invention, white ladies would not buy the ringer. I was afraid to be known because of my color in having it introduced into the market, and that is the only reason. So in 1888, she sold the patent for $18, which I think is very sad that she had to do that. Ellen Egloui, and she's a star in my list. Beatrix Potter was a mycologist. She studied the fungus, and she did a lot of groundbreaking work, but nobody would pay attention because she was a female. So she got depressed and retreated to her home and wrote the books on Peter Rabbit. So we get Peter Rabbit from her, but we lost her science on the humble fungus. Today, they are digging up her original works and trying to restore her to her rightful place in science. Now, Hedy Lamarr was a femme fatale of the 1940s movies industry in Hollywood. And she said, anybody can be glamorous, just stand still and look stupid. Well, that would mean if you're smart, you look like Mrs. Pifflesnick there on the right. Well, we don't look like that either. We are allowed to be dressed any way we like and look any way we like. We can be glamorous, we can be ugly, we can be anything we like. Now, why did I pick Hedy Lamarr? I picked one person from the 20th century, and I picked Hedy Lamarr because she and George Antheil invented frequency hopping for World War II to prevent jamming signals sent to torpedoes. She was granted the patent, and it was renamed spread spectrum technology. And the reason your cell phone can pick your recipient out of all the billions of cell phone calls going on is because of what she invented, frequency hopping. So she is the one 20th century person I put in because people wouldn't think of an actress as being a scientist, but she was. This is my definition of a scientist. I've stitched my dress with continents, bound the equator round my waist. I waltz to a steady rhythm, bending slightly. I can't stop my arms plunging into galaxies, gloved to elbows in adhesive gold. I carry on my arms a star's vaccine. With such greedy sight, my eyelids flutter in the breeze like a strange, enthusiastic plant. No one fears me except Error, who is everywhere. And when Nina Cassian was a national poet of Romania. And when I asked her if I had permission to use her poem, she asked me, said, sure, you can use my poem. What do you think it meant? And I told her it meant to me what a scientist was. And she said, oh, that's interesting. I wasn't thinking of science when I wrote it. Don't know what she was thinking of. Any rate, we're at the end. No pessimist ever discovered the secrets of the stars or sailed to an uncharted land or opened a new heaven to the human spirit. If you don't know who Helen Keller is, Google her. She was a wonderful lady of the 20th century, not a scientist, but nonetheless a wonderful lady. And the URL for the webpage for students is given there. And the book that contains all the stories that I know about all the women I have so far, about 400, is called The Hidden Giants, 3rd edition. You want to get it from Amazon. And at this point, I will stop sharing the screen, if that's okay.
That's great. No, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Sethanne. That was a tremendous amount of information that I, as a professional scientist, knew very little of. I mean, there were a number of names that you gave out there that I said, oh yeah, I know. But if you'd asked me what exactly they did, I would have been hard pressed to come through. So I really, really enjoyed this talk.
Oh, thank you.
Now, one of the things you said is you had an actual tablet. Okay, yeah, there it is. So is that one written in cuneiform?
Yes, it's a Dr. Lulu's prescription tablet.
Okay.
It apparently they had a lot of trouble with boils, and they had a lot of recipes for treating boils. You see how small it is. I mean, it's just not that big. It can fit in my pocket.
I have a very hard time thinking how you would do that on a tablet so tiny.
Well,
it's really kind of amazing.
Very gifted. Now, if you look, I don't want to destroy it. You see the blank rectangle?
Yeah.
Well, the blank rectangle is used as their database. Line 1 to 1,000 of tablet 1. Lines 1001 to 2000 of tablet 2. So this was their card catalog. Now, he only had one, so there's nothing on it. And it would fit in his pocket or her pocket. I don't know whether Dr. Lulu was a him or a her. I just know it was Dr. Lulu. And it's on both sides. The back side isn't as well preserved as the front side, this side. But I think that's a real tablet from, they let me have this one. They wouldn't let me have hers and Hedwana's, but they let me have this one.
Well, that's quite a treat to have. And I'm glad we don't have to write so small these days.
Yes.
And I'm also glad that, you know, the use of how you treat boils is not quite as necessary today as well.
Yes, it wasn't, it was very ugly, the solution. You mix things together that you wouldn't want to mix.
All right. So Grant Justice has been monitoring the chat on YouTube. So Grant, why don't you turn on your video and let us know if you found any interesting questions in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a great chat audience tonight. So first off, and this is one that I wanted you to give a little more clarification on as well. The chats caught this. When you said that the Dark Ages weren't really dark, you did talk about it a little bit, about some like monostatic learning and some more like theology based. But would you elaborate a little more on what you mean by that?
It's because of the schooling. The convents and monasteries, the convents trained the girls, the monasteries trained the boys in the 7 liberal arts. So they weren't indoctrinated into a religion. They went to school, and these were actual schools run by the convents and monasteries. So to me, that's not a dark age. And the monks and the nuns were learned people who could read and write and cipher. And I don't find that dark. Now, the Roman Empire had fallen, and maybe road travel was not easy, but each little place built its convent and its monastery all over the place. And I have several names of famous abbesses who ran schools, several in England, several in Germany, several in France. And Italy, of course, was always ahead with the women.
So I'd like to follow up with that because you mentioned that astronomy is one of the 7 liberal arts, and that the first scientist was part astronomer, right? That you look at that, and when you look at today's education, it's rare to find a high school that has astronomy classes in it and such, and so it's interesting how our technological behavior, our technological understanding and our ability to keep track of time, because astronomers were really important early on because of the calendar and such. It
Yes,
sort of made astronomy less important on a daily basis.
yes. And unfortunately, I think it's very unfortunate, but they no longer teach the 7 liberal arts. They teach reading, writing, not script, but printing. And that's about it. They don't teach much math. The students don't get a good grounding in math the way they did 100 years ago.
Okay. Well, it's just, as an astronomer, it's interesting to sort of look back and say, oh yeah, astronomy was much more important earlier on, because it really affected your daily life and the planting of crops and everything. And I always like to point out that you're down at USNO. You guys are the official timekeepers
Yes.
of the world.
Yes.
Okay? Astronomers are responsible for the calendar.
Yes, I was chief of the Nautical Almanac Office. I did the Astronomical Almanac.
All right, Grant, what else we got from the chat?
Absolutely. I'm just enjoying everywhere that you have been in your life thus far. You have like a Rolodex of jobs that you just pull out, like, oh yeah, I did that. I was the head of that for 5 years. And this is one that I actually, not necessarily as topic related, but Hildegard, you were talking a little bit about that. It was some of the music that you shared. The chat mentioned this as well. Was that not the first usage of polyphonic music as well?
I don't know. It may have been. That one I don't know the answer to. Because it was early Gregorian chant. This was still early for Gregorian chant, so it could well have been the first 2. I don't know. All I know is people tell me they fainted when they hear her music because it was so beautiful.
Yeah, at the time, especially given the resonance in the cathedrals and
the cathedrals. Yeah.
That is just so much fun when you walk into these giant cathedrals and you really hear it resonating through. La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. We entered in that and they played some beautiful music that resonating throughout. And I was just, wow, what an experience.
Videographer experience in the comments. STSEI is Space Telescope Science Institute. That's where we're located and who gives the talks. All right, so another one that I don't think I saw in the talk that the chat was talking about is Ada Lovelace.
Oh yes, I left out, as I said, everyone I put had 29 behind her, and Ada, the Countess of Lovelace, was the daughter of what's his name, the poet. Oh well, it doesn't matter. She became somebody who monitored Babbage, Sir Charles Babbage, and Babbage wrote the first, designed the first difference engine, which is essentially a pre-computer. And she wrote the subroutine that would make it run. So when they actually built the device in the mid 20th century, they ran her subroutine and it worked. So she is known as the world's first computer programmer, and the DoD language ADA is named in her honor.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
And Wikipedia says that she's the only child of Lord Byron.
Not Lord Byron. That's why I couldn't think of his name right offhand. Yes. And that she didn't grow up under his tutelage. However, her mother withdrew her from his tutelage and raised her on her own. and she read math books on her own and then corresponded with Babbage about designing the first difference engine.
Wonderful.
I was going to say I had 3 more questions written down, but you actually answered them throughout your talk. And most, if not all, of the names that were thrown out in the beginning were part of your presentation as well. So you've done a good job of quelling them before they came up.
Oh, good.
The very first thing I had written down was Hypatia, and that was like number 3 on your list. So Hypatia, thank you.
Hypatia, yes.
I used to do it the way the Americans do, and I had a Greek person in my audience who yelled at me and said, "Do not say it that way. You say it Hypatia because she's Greek."
and that's kind of it's always useful to find it, because like Tycho Brahe. All right, I pronounce it as Tycho Brahe. Other people will call it Tycho, and I'm like, I'm not a native, as being not a native speaker, you always wonder, all right, can I get the pronunciation absolutely right? I prefer to get it right. And so,
well, we want to talk about Sophia instead of Tycho.
Oh, well, certainly Sophia, yeah.
Yes.
And you left out Carolyn Herschel, and
I left out Carolyn Herschel. Yes, I didn't. I left out Maria Mitchell.
Yeah. Now, I would say one of the things is we are blessed in astronomy is having a good number of female astronomers in our history. And do you think there's any particular reason for that?
Astronomy was one of the 7 liberal arts.
Right.
So astronomers were always part of the history of science. Math astronomers went together. That if you hired the king would hire a math astronomer, one person, to do the calendar and the math and everything. That went together throughout history. So you'd find women. There were lots of women hired by the Paris Observatory who did calculated almanacs. There's one in ancient Spain who wrote almanacs, calculated almanacs for Toledo. And of course, the Nautical Almanac Office at the U.S. Naval Observatory was founded in 1848, and they hired a lot of women mathematicians to calculate the books, because it takes a lot of calculation to produce one book.
Yes. All right. Well, Thomas has to go to another event in a few minutes, so we're going to have to wrap this up. And I just want to thank you so much for the enlightenment you've brought to all of us here. And I want to remind our audience that next month on December 7th, we will have the James Webb Space Telescope countdown to launch. Launch is scheduled for December 18th. Everybody cross your fingers.
Yeah, cross your fingers.
This is going to be fantastic. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.